Hey, Minasan, welcome back to the show, the podcast where we dive so deep into media drama, political chaos, and human silliness that even deep-sea fish look at us and go, "Oi, you okay down there?" Today we're tackling a topic so messy, so confusing, so full of editing cuts that even YouTubers are like, "Bro, calm down." Yes, we're talking mainstream media, that noble profession once dedicated to truth, fairness, and occasionally mispronouncing foreign leader names. But don't worry. I will guide you gently through the nonsense, like a sarcastic tour guide who's had too much matcha latte and not enough patience.
So, our tour starts with a story that is just wild. Recently, media commentator Tao Jie sat down and unpacked the latest mini-scandal between the BBC and former U.S. President Donald Trump. Hi, you heard right. The BBC actually apologized to Trump. I mean, BBC apologizing to Trump is like Godzilla apologizing for stepping on a building. Oh, sumimasen ne, didn't see you there. The whole issue was a BBC documentary that edited Trump's January 6 speech in a way that, according to Tao Jie, completely twisted what he actually said. He's pretty sure it wasn't just sloppy editing, but a deliberate spin.
Okay, so let's look at the actual edit that started all this. On the left, you see what Trump said. He says they're going to the Capitol to cheer on senators. Then, 50 minutes later, a 50-minute gap, he says, "We fight like hell." But the BBC, they just mash those two clips together. Suddenly, a statement about political support sounds like a direct call to arms at the Capitol. Tao Jie's take? This is way, way beyond editing for time. He calls it a complete reversal of the truth.
So naturally, the BBC got called out. And they did apologize, but they refused to pay any damages. Their defense was, well, you be the judge. First, they said the show never even aired in the US, so no harm done, right? Second, they argued it couldn't have damaged his reputation since, he'd already been elected. And third, they insisted the edit wasn't malicious, it was just, to shorten a really long speech. Basically, their argument was, it's fine, he won anyway, and we were just trying to save a few seconds.
Yeah, Tao Jie was not buying that. Not for a second. He says, look, those first 2 points, you can argue about them in court. But that third one, the idea that it was just an innocent edit, he thinks that's totally indefensible for a professional news organization. For a broadcaster like the BBC with 100 years of experience to claim they accidentally created a misleading narrative by splicing two quotes 50 minutes apart, he just doesn't think it's credible. He sees it as pure intentional misdirection.
And this is where the story gets bigger. Tao Jie uses this one incident to launch into a full-scale roast of Western mainstream media. He says this isn't just one bad editor having a bad day. It's a symptom of a much deeper problem, what he calls a white-left ideological filter that's taken over these big news institutions. It's like someone in the editing room went, yes, facts are nice, but what if we just rearrange them, ne?
So what exactly does he mean by this white-left filter? It's his term for an ideological lens that he believes makes these newsrooms prioritize a certain progressive narrative over just reporting the facts neutrally. So it becomes less about what happened and more about how can we frame what happened to fit our worldview. In the case of the Trump edit, the preferred narrative was that he incited violence, so the facts were kind of rearranged to make that point.
Tao Jie has this absolutely brilliant zinger to sum it all up. He says these outlets that used to be known for impartiality are turning into editorial opinion factories, just dressed up in the costume of journalism. His line is, wow. You guys used to be neutral, now you sound like Twitter with good grammar. It's all the hot takes, all the moral certainty, just with better punctuation. It's like cosplay, but for politics. Very, very high-budget cosplay.
And this really gets to the heart of his argument. That BBC edit, it wasn't just a random mistake. According to Tao Jie, it's a symptom of a systemic problem. It's a sign of a media culture where the goal isn't just to inform anymore, but to persuade. He sees it as this broader trend of Western media trying so hard to appear morally enlightened that they sometimes forget to do the basics, like, check the facts. It's a small detail, really, very tiny, barely noticeable, like a missing engine on an airplane.
Hey, quick intermission while the BBC edits my sentence to say something I never said. If you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe. Hit that button like you're correcting a journalist on Twitter. And leave a 5-star review, nah? 5 stars means you love the show. 4 stars means you love me but hate my sarcasm. 3 stars means you're confused but committed. 2 stars means you work for the BBC's editing department. 1 star, definitely Trump himself. Okay, on to the rest of the chaos.
All right, we're back. So, was that whole Trump edit thing just a one-off blunder? Tao Jie's answer is a big, resounding no. He argues it's part of a much wider pattern.
And to make his case, he points to what he sees as consistently biased coverage in other major global stories, arguing that this same ideological filter is at play again and again and again.
Let's take South Africa, for example. Back in the 80s, the Western media was all over the anti-apartheid movement, painting this really heroic picture. But today, Tao Jie points out there's this near-total media silence on the country's really complex, messy modern problems, like skyrocketing crime or the displacement of white farmers. So why the silence now? He thinks it's because the current reality doesn't fit the simple, clean, progressive narrative the media fell in love with back then. It's just easier to look away.
He also maps out what he calls the information chain for news coming out of places like Gaza. He suggests that what we end up seeing on our screens is the result of a long game of telephone. An event happens on the ground. Step 1, it gets framed by Hamas officials. Step 2, their version is passed to local UN staff, who are, of course, hired locally. Step 3, those staffers then become the main sources for Western reporters. And the result, he argues, is a narrative shaped by several biased parties gets broadcast worldwide as if it's objective fact.
So the big question is, why does this keep happening? Tao Jie's diagnosis points straight to the internal culture of these massive media companies. He thinks the problem isn't just a few bad apples, but a whole self-reinforcing bubble where one specific way of seeing the world has become the only acceptable way.
He basically describes an ideological litmus test to even get in the door. He claims that in today's big newsrooms, you pretty much have to hate a figure like Trump to get hired. And what that does is create this giant echo chamber where everyone thinks the same way and reinforces each other's biases. But here's the crazy part. They don't even see it as bias. They honestly believe they're being objective because they've never had to seriously engage with a different viewpoint inside their bubble. They just can't wrap their heads around why, say, a farmer in Ohio might see things differently.
Now, Tao Jie actually worked at the BBC back in the 80s and 90s, so he draws this really stark contrast between then and now. The old guard, as he calls them, valued professionalism above everything. Their job was just to report the facts, leave emotion out of it, and they really valued reporters with real on-the-ground experience. But the new guard, he says, lets their ideology define what professionalism even is. The stories become emotionally charged, an Ivy League degree is worth more than life experience, and it feels like they're reporting for each other, for fellow elites, not for the general public.
So what's the end result of all of this? Well, it's a full-blown crisis of trust. When a major news outlet, especially a public broadcaster, looks like it's traded in neutrality for activism, people just stop believing them. The very foundation they're built on, their credibility, just starts to crumble away.
And this has real, tangible consequences. I mean, money talks, right? In the UK, every household with a TV has to pay a mandatory license fee to fund the BBC. It's over £100 a year. Tao Jie says that as trust has gone down, more and more British people are just refusing to pay. It's a protest that hits the corporation right where it hurts, in the wallet.
And beyond just the license fee, people are doing what Tao Jie calls voting with their remotes. They've lost faith in the traditional gatekeepers of news, so they're going to YouTube, they're going to independent creators, they're going everywhere else to find different perspectives. His point is that the public isn't stupid. They can tell when they're being spun, and they'll just change the channel.
All of this leaves us with a pretty terrifying question, doesn't it? In a world where the traditional referees of truth are seen as just another team on the field, who gets to decide what's real? When we all have our own facts and our own media, how can we possibly agree on a shared reality? All right, that's all for today's deep dive into media shenanigans. Special thanks to our producer, FireflyHaku, the only person I trust to edit my audio without turning my sentences into political propaganda. If the BBC hired FireflyHaku, maybe they wouldn't be apologizing every other week. Just saying, nay? Thank you for listening, thank you for surviving, and thank you for pretending this counts as educational content. See you next time. John Nay.